Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just tuning in, this week's episode of Inside the Bullring will start momentarily. If you're just tuning in, this week's episode of Inside the Bullring will start momentarily. We will be announcing the first class of the Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame live on the air here tonight on Inside the Bullring. All right, joining us on the program here tonight, myself, Steve Ovens, host of Inside the Bullring. We've got our usual suspects, Megan Dupuy, Kim Symonds on with us tonight as well. I know we've got a lot of folks that are going to be joining us for the first time tonight, and we also have Morgan Colegrove in studio with us here, who will be helping us make the announcement for tonight's Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame class of 2018. We're very excited to get this show kicked off here tonight and tell everybody about our Hall of Fame class for 2018. We have got a great group of Hall of Famers who will now be forever known as Hall of Famers here, Morgan, and we're looking forward to that. Our audience still building here, so I'm going to... Morgan, I think you had a great idea tonight before we announcing the names tonight, kind of going over, because again, I know there will be a lot of people that are tuning in for the first time, maybe didn't see the episode that we had you on a few weeks back talking about the Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame. So why don't you go ahead and kind of give us a little, talk to us a little bit about how this hall got started.
Well, first off, I'd like to say I'm very impressed that I made it down here in the middle of the big city from the farm country and didn't get lost again. So we're doing real good here. This was actually a brainchild from a number of years ago that got put on the back burner, and I am going to credit Steve Ovens with bringing this back to the front burner. He got started pushing this a little bit, and I jumped on board, and we helped out each other get this thing started, and then a bunch of other people jumped in there to help. I gotta thank the committee, the selection committee, because without them this would have fallen flat on its face. They put a lot of time and effort into this. We put together 32 nominees as a base, and with the idea that we were going to go with 15 inductees for the first year and step up to 5 every year thereafter. But something like this, it's like beating your head against the wall trying to pick who you want to go in something in a Hall of Fame, because there's 150 names that you could put on. We come up with 32 names to start with, and then through 5 rounds of elimination, we pared it down to our 15 inductees. The guys on the committee that I can't thank enough for the job that they did: Jerry Symonds, Bobby Sherwood, Larry Kennison, Fred Amon, Tony Van Pelt, Dan Burry, and myself. And I'm not sure how many 100 years of racing experience there is in that list, but there's a couple. So basically that's what it is. We're going to be announcing them tonight. The plan is on Legends Night, August 25th, that we're still fighting over a start time, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock.
Okay.
But we'll let everybody know. Tentatively, we'll say at 2 o'clock. The gates will open. All legends and their families and the inductees and anybody else that wants to come in will be allowed into the facility. the show area behind the grandstands. We've got a sponsored chicken barbecue for the afternoon. Right now, I've got pretty much committed 3 or 4 vintage cars to be there. One with some history at Woodhull Raceway. We may end up with a couple more. We'll have tables up with scrapbooks and memorabilia of all kinds from Woodhull Raceway. And it'll be a lot of the old drivers and crew members and track officials and so on that'll be in there. Just have a good time for the afternoon.
All right. So that's the plan there for August 25th. And, of course, we will... All right, let's see. So I've got some folks.
By the way, Steve?
Yep.
I need to talk to your wife about that because your vacation's going to get canceled.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's see. Now, I've got some folks that are saying...
I've lost you in a year.
Yep, there we go. I've got some folks that are saying they're getting a little bit of some audio problem here, so I'm just going to take a quick peek at things here and make sure that I've got everything just like... You know what, we're going to make a quick adjustment here, and I'm almost wondering if possibly it's because we're using both of these headsets here. So I'm just going to try something real quick, and we'll see if this makes a difference here, because I want to make sure that this is all right for our big announcement here tonight. So Morgan, I'm going to trade with you here. We will... All right, I'm going to trade you that for those. And
I'm an old timer. I'm an old timer anyway. I just assume hold the microphone.
there you go. All right. So let's see. Bobby Sherwood says it sounds like we're in a 55-gallon drum. Well, let's try this and see if this is any better here.
It's all the race car parts on the wall that's creating that.
It could be. It very well could be. I bet it. You know what? We're going to have to tear down the Casey Pavlik door and quarter panel here down in the studio. So, folks, if you're tuning in and listening, we haven't announced any of the names yet, but we are getting ready to do that. But we just made a little change here, so let us know. Let us know how you've got it. And Kim says not better. Okay. Well, now what in the world is going on here tonight?
You know, you did jack up your volume on my suggestion. If you want to drop it back just a little bit, that might take care of it.
Okay. Let's...
You got to remember, I've been around race cars all my life. I can't hear anyway.
All right. I think what we may end up having to do here... Man, they're saying they're getting an echo. I don't understand.
I would play it over like my headset so you could hear it, but it would echo even worse.
Right. Okay. Well, we've just made a couple of changes here, so let's see if... Boy, I'm not sure what we've done so wrong here. Well, they said lowering the volume didn't help, so we'll kick that back up. Okay, well, Morgan, I'm stumped here.
Don't look at me. I deal with batteries, and anything more than that, that's your purview.
Yeah. Okay. I think okay, Dan Barry says it's better. Somebody just said it's better. Good now. No echo. Okay. Maybe we're good. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I appreciate everybody that's tuning in here tonight. We may just have to kick this audio board out of here. This one's been kicking around the old Turn 5 studios for quite a while now, but I think everybody seems to think it sounds good now, so maybe we've got our issue fixed here. Morgan, we talked about, and we'll just do the Reader's Digest version here for people that did hear it earlier. You've got August 25th is when all of this will take place, and there was 7 committee members who not only came up with the nominees but also did the voting.
There were some suggestions for the outside, but the committee pretty much set up the entire list.
Okay. So, are you ready to start going through these names?
I think so. We'll see if we can match up with the photos you put up on the board.
Yes. All right. So,
if you don't, you realize there's going to be all kinds of comments.
Oh, I'm sure. And that's the beauty of this, is there's comments here that folks can tune into and chime along. So, let's go ahead and get into the first nominee.
I didn't change the order these were in. They were put in as we eliminated others and moved everybody up the list and so on. So they're in a listing that has nothing to do with how many votes they got. Majority of the inductees got unanimous votes, so that's beside the point. They're just in a random order, so don't anybody get upset if I've got your favorite way down on the bottom or somebody that you weren't real excited about up on top. We're just going to start out. Obviously, the first 3 on here are going to be what I consider no-brainers. They were pretty much unanimous right from the get-go. And the first one is George Williams. And I think the picture you've got is George, 65th birthday possibly, on the front straight at Woodhull Raceway. There's 2 young men standing there holding the cake.
Okay.
The one with glasses is Rocket Roger Williams.
Okay.
The other one is Bill.
I was going to ask you who they were. Yep.
So it's been a while. But, of course, George Williams is the guy that owned the farmland. He laid out the original track. He had the brilliant idea to do this. And he is the reason we're all up on that hill every week. The second one going in, and Alice is going to kill me for that one picture, I'm sure.
It's probably the one I picked.
I didn't know if you were putting all the pictures that I gave you up or if you just picked one at a time.
So the one that I chose to put up here is Jim and Alice. Oh, somebody's off of mute there. Megan or Kim, check your audio. There you go. All right. So the one I have is the color photo of Jim and Alice, and it appears that they were somewhere within the buildings of the racetrack.
They're sitting in front of a window?
Yes.
That's actually at the Woodhull Fire Station at a banquet. We used to have the banquet at the Woodhull Fire Station. That's a very early picture of Jim and Alice. That's back a few years ago when I first started for the track. Jim and Alice Williams, of course, Jim was the guy everybody saw out on the track and doing the maintenance work and running the show and taking care of everything else. Alice is the one that did the book work and the support stuff. She took care of a lot of the stuff with the concession stand. She did the handicapping there for a long time. She did the points. But she wasn't out in front of everybody. But I'm going to tell you what, the track would not have survived and thrived as it had if it wasn't for both of those people. So we joined the 2 of them. Actually, they were joined many years ago with rings on their fingers, but we joined the 2 of them as inductees, and they will go in as inductees to the initial class of Hall of Fame, Jim and Alice Williams.
All right. And we've got one more member of the Williams family that will join them as well.
One more member of the Williams family. A lot of people will remember him as the first flagman at Woodhull Raceway. And he also drove at Woodhull a number of times. He drove all over the Northeast in his own cars. And you might say, well, he was a driver and he helped build the track and he was the original flagman, but I'm going to tell you a little quick story about that. If it was not for Bob Williams, Woodhull Raceway would not exist. Because in 1962 or 63, I believe it was 63, Bob Williams built a race car. And he started traveling to Rue, Pennsylvania, and Smethport, and to Angelica, and some of the other tracks around the area, and racing cars. Well, one night his car was not available. He couldn't take it to the racetrack, whether it was a blown motor or what, I don't remember the exact story. But he was still going to go to the racetrack because he was a race fan too. And he talked his dad and mother into going with him. And George fell in love. So I've always said that if Bob Williams hadn't built a race car and talked his dad into going to that stupid racetrack up the road, probably Woodhull Raceway would never come to existence.
Well, that as well as the fact that, you know, if George hadn't gone to that racetrack and, you know, gave a piece of his mind.
Yeah, that actually is a story we've told a number of times, that George basically came home from another track with the attitude, they don't want to listen to me how they're supposed to do it, I'm going to show them how to do it.
All right. So we've got 4 members of the Williams family, the founding family of Woodhull Raceway. The next set of Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame inductees celebrating their 40th anniversary, and unfortunately, we lost one of our own here a couple weeks ago.
Just a couple days. This is one of the sadder ones because just a couple days after this pair were voted in to the Hall of Fame list, we lost Dali Eccleston. Dali and Earl, if you were in the pits for the last 40 years, Dali and Earl were the face of Woodhull Raceway. Earl's run the pits and Dali's run Earl. That was, and I've told him that.
Yeah.
That's not a negative. But everybody has got a story about Dali Eccleston. I have stood nose to nose with that lady, and 10 minutes later wanted to hug her for something she said or did. She was very opinionated. She was in charge. She was going to do things her way. She didn't like change, and she let you know it. But she had a heart like all outdoors. If you needed anything, if Dali heard about it, she'd be knocking on your door. And just wonderful people. Earl was a racer when the track started out, and like you say, 40 years ago, they went to work for Woodhull Raceway, and they've been the face of Woodhull Raceway up there in the pits for 40 years. And I well deserving to get into the Hall of Fame as the initial class.
Our next inductee, also a longtime employee of Woodhull Raceway, who just in the last couple weeks we've seen back at the racetrack in the tower hanging around, and that's been awesome. He came home. He came home. That's right.
Ronny Towsley in 1965, on June 13th, 1965, was the lineup man. On June 13th, 2016, Ronny Towsley was the lineup man. He was the last employee that was there opening day, and he had been there. I dare say that he had not missed only 2 or 3 races over that period of time. I mean, and it wasn't just the fact that he was a long-term employee. He took over building and grounds maintenance to a certain extent. Scott Drake bought the track. And 2 weeks before opening day, Scott's out on the lawnmower. And Ronnie's standing in the driveway with his arms folded. And Scott stopped and asked him what the problem, and Ronnie informed him that was my job. So he learned very quickly. Ronnie took care of business down at the racetrack. He lived right there next door to the racetrack, and he's been one of the most fun people to deal with for years. Great guy. He also helped me out when I was doing the PR. Every once in a while, he'd steal the pace car and go do a promotion deal, which was fantastic. So he's done a little bit of everything up there, but we'll always remember him over at the lineup road. He had a bad accident back a couple years ago.
Yeah.
He's been in rehab. He's had a little problem, and it is absolutely wonderful not only to see him back at Woodhull Raceway, but to see the glow on his face.
Absolutely, and that was really just after I had come to Woodhull that he went through his accident and everything, and it was awesome to see him walk in the tower a couple weeks back. I mean, it was just one of those moments in the booth that you don't see coming, and it took you a second to kind of realize just how awesome that is to have him back, as you say, back home. So our next inductees here for the Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame, a name synonymous with Woodhull Raceway over the years, Morgan.
On June 13th, 1965, I keep repeating that date. That's a Sunday afternoon. They opened the gates through the grippers, green flag at 2 o'clock. Somewhere shortly thereafter, this guy won the first modern stock heat. He turned around and he won the first modern stock feature. That's not only to say 3 of his cars were in the top 5 on opening day in the feature event. And he's always been a multi-car owner. He's always been the cars that you had to race against to get to first. And that, of course, is Harold Sherwood. And we didn't do just Harold.
Yeah.
Because Harold did not build his racing empire by himself. Shirley had a lot to do with it. And she owned specific cars over the years. Shirley was a powder puff driver. Got to tell you a quick story. Harold took off and went to the concession stand or went to the official stand or something, and when he came back, the car was gone. And I'm not sure just exactly which track, whether it was Hunt or Perry. Excuse me. But she had taken it out for a powder puff. And I don't remember if she won the powder puff or not, but when she came back in, of course, I don't think Harold really said too much because you really didn't buck Shirley when she wanted to do something. But I love the lady to death, but here again, she was a very strong, opinionated woman. And on the way home that night, they had to stop to the hospital because she's gone into labor.
Oh, boy.
So Shirley promoted Woodhull Raceway. She told Bones Boisher from Stock Car Racing Magazine in 1989, he says, why do you guys, you could race anywhere in the Northeast, you've got the cars, you've got the money, you could go anywhere you wanted to go and probably win. Why do you come to Woodhull Raceway? And she just put her hands on her hips and said, because it's the best damn racetrack in the country. So, it's just so, Harold without Shirley was not an option.
Yeah.
Harold and Shirley Sherwood are going into the Hall of Fame together.
And that'll bring us up to our next Hall of Fame inductee, and the Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame welcomes Bob Paul to the Hall of Fame.
Bob, there's going to be people, and I'm going to guarantee you, because I've laughed with him about it, there's going to be people that are going to say, why? Well, again, there's a backstory. Bob Paul lived on a farm in Woodhull, and he helped lay out and build that racetrack as a kid. He also, as a young man, raced there on opening day. And he continued to race there throughout his entire career, as well as racing some other places, but Woodhull was always home. He never won a he won a lot of races, but he never won a championship. His statement was always, I was the guy the champion had to beat. The thing is, he took off with the antique modifieds for a while and traveled around the country, but he always come back to Woodhull when they weren't racing, and he always made sure there was a show at Woodhull for the antique modifieds every year. He came back after that with a crate sportsman. So he retired and come back.
Yeah.
And while he was doing that, he was driving for LG Kennedy Trucking Company. And he created a couple of really major sponsorship situations up there.
Yeah.
So
That name is
he's
familiar
always
to
been
me.
he's been always a pro Woodhull. But him racing that crate sportsman, he was the last driver, active driver, that had raced in 1965 to finally retire at Woodhull Raceway. So, little special spot. And he's always been one of those guys that if he wasn't there, that you needed his help, he was there. But if he wasn't there to help you, he was there to give you a smile. You know, he's just one of the nice guys of the sport. And well deserving to get into the Hall of Fame.
Our next Hall of Fame inductee is a driver who still has family racing at Woodhull Raceway. Tell us about our next inductee, Morgan.
If anybody doesn't recognize the name of Herbie Layfield, and that means if you're 75 or 7, because even the kids have heard stories about Herbie Layfield, and they'll recognize the Layfield name. This family was a dynasty in the Northeast. Herbie Layfield started racing in 1948. That's why he had the car number 48. I'm not going to say he was too young to race and he lied about his age. I would never say Herbie ever lied. However, he readily admits that he was 21 for almost 6 years. Anyway, he's raced all over the area. He found a home at Woodhull in the 6-cylinder Sportsman. He's run late models and a couple other cars there, but the 6-cylinder Sportsman class, he dominated for quite a while up there. And he was the type of guy that would win, climb out of the car, get his picture taken. All the kids would come down, get their picture taken. The guy that was helping him with the car would get in the car, drive it back to the pits. Herbie would come up in the crowd, and it would spend an hour before he'd get back to the pits. Just that type of person. He was a Richard Petty back before it was fashionable. And, you know, I've seen Billy Van Pelt, some others do it, but Herbie was probably one of the first that played the crowd like that.
Yeah.
And he's got a list of probably 5 or 6 Hall of Fames he already belongs to. He's just legendary at Woodhull Raceway. And at 84 years old, 2 weeks ago, I interviewed him in the grandstand at Woodhull Raceway as they're watching his grandson.
Awesome.
And sharp as a tack.
Yeah.
And one last statement for all those people that are watching this show.
Yeah.
And there's probably about half of them that are going to understand what I'm saying. The other half can ask the question later. He maintains that Mustang 6-cylinder was not a 300. It was legal.
Now, you talk about the folks that are watching tonight. We've got a lot of folks that have been putting comments in here, and we definitely appreciate that. If you've got a driver that you hear that you've got a great story for or just want to send congratulations, we definitely welcome you to do so. Paul Edwards is watching our coverage here tonight, says that car number 48 was his neighbor, so that's awesome. And Robin Messler chimes in here, amazing guy, as we're sitting here talking about Herbie Layfield. So we appreciate all your comments as we're revealing the 2018 class for the Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame. We move from one legend to another here, Morgan. And I think all I really need to say is car number 74.
Absolutely. A lot of people know that car right immediately. They grew up as a hero. Kind of lay out a little bit of history. Ronnie Baker started racing in 1957 or 58. I'm not sure 100%. I will have that information all written up in the booklet, but I got to go do a little bit more research. But he was racing at Cuba Lake Raceway and out towards that area. Cuba Lake closed, Olean closed, and Ronnie hooked up with John Burgess, legendary car owner from over in the southern part of Pennsylvania, or southern part of the area in Pennsylvania. And they had a purple, almost the color of this tote that I'm sitting here looking at, a metallic purple Valiant. And they came up and they really did well in the Woodhull 100 at the end of the year. And the following year, that purple Valiant was there for a regular. Ronnie had a little bit of different style when he started out, coming from some of the Western New York tracks, where dirt cars back then looked like a bag of walnuts by the end of the season.
Okay.
It was a full contact sport. Well, Woodhull had a little bit different feeling about that. And about the fourth week of the season, with purple paint on almost every late model in the pits, there was a driver's meeting up along the hedgerow just outside the track property. And I don't think that Ronnie was a willing participant. There was nothing that got physical, but it was explained to him that we do not drive like that. And Ronnie settled in to be a very aggressive but very smart racer. Ronnie's a legend in the Northeast, and probably what he's the most legendary known for is the bright blue number 74 Maple City Dodge cars. In those days, it was a new car class.
Yeah.
In 1971, you had a 1971 car. In 1972, you had a 1972 car. He had a brand new, with the Maple City Dodge sponsorship, they got the bodies. They weren't complete cars, but they were all factory bodies. He had a Challenger, 2 Chargers, and a Dodge Demon, which is the same thing as a Duster. Dart Sport, whatever you want to call it, and brand new cars.
Wow.
I mean, they look brand new. They were a couple chassis. So his team was also the only team that I know of that ran a big block Hemi at Woodhull.
Okay.
It didn't work well, but they only had it in for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And they put the 440 back in. But there were some old Hemis back in the 60s, but for a 426 big block Hemi, they're the only team that I know of that had one.
Morgan, I'm reading the comments here, and there are people who are clamoring for Morgan Colegrove to write a book. And I only mention this because you told me.
You know about this. There's about 10 pages and 250 photographs that are semi-laid out by the end of, depending on what happens the rest of the summer, by the end of the summer, I'm hoping to have it pretty much ready to put together. And I'm not sure it's going to be published in a book form to start with.
Yeah.
I'd like it to be. We're looking at finances a little bit, and it may be a little bit better to make DVDs instead of actual
that would be
bound
fun.
books.
Yeah.
And we'll play with that. But I've bbeen working on this off and on for years, and this last winter, towards the middle of the winter, I got a little more serious about it. And I think what it'll end up being is Woodhull Raceway, the Jim Williams years.
Yeah.
Because that's going to overpower the size of the thing without going on into the 2000s and
right.
You know.
So a couple of things that people have been commenting here. Rob Symonds had a great point. He said everybody should understand that he's rattling off these stories from memory and not written down. And I can say and I know people probably know this already, but I can tell you for sure, there are no notes here. There's a list of names.
You know what?
Yeah, I've
This
got that.
is
Hold
what
on,
I'm
let
using.
me get your camera. There you go. There's his list.
All this is just a list so I stay in the same order he's putting pictures up.
Oh, that's absolutely right.
I have no idea why I can do it, but I love doing it.
Yeah.
So on to our next one.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, before we get to that next name, there's some people that have joined here recently that weren't around in the beginning part of the video.
Okay.
So just a quick recap before we do our next driver. George Williams, Jim and Alice Williams, Bob Williams, Earl and Dali Eccleston, Ronnie Towsley, Harold and Shirley Sherwood, Bob Paul, Herbie Layfield, Ron Baker. Those are the names that have been announced here so far, and you've got our next name.
And the next one, if I tell you orange Chevelle with a white top, and he backed it into turn one, his dirt track style, 90% of the people that are listening are probably going to know. Arnie Flint was voted in. Now, Arnie was, we were talking about this earlier. Arnie was the type of driver that he was very aggressive. His solution to a car that wouldn't handle was to drive it harder. They say Dale Earnhardt could drive a bad car and win with it. Well, Arnie Flint was the type of driver that there were 100 drivers in the pits that could drive a good car to a win. Artie Flint was the type of driver that could take a piece of crap and put it in the winner's circle. He was just fully committed, flat out, put on the floor, big block 427, screaming under the hood. He turned more RPMs with a big block than some of the guys did with a small block. Just exciting to watch. And as technology changed and we went into the modifieds, he did move into the modifieds. But as the boughten frames and torsion bar suspension and the shocks became a big issue, he didn't adapt well. But I'll tell you what, for the first 30 years, 25 years of Woodhull Raceway's history, Arnie Flint was the man to watch.
And I'll tell you, there's a lot of comments coming in for this nominee, and I shouldn't say nominee, inductee. We'll say now. A lot of people talking, and there's been 2-3 comments here about Bulldozer Flint.
Bulldozer Flint, and he actually put a blade on it and came out and during hot laps. He didn't run it during the race, but he'd gotten a little aggressive, and his dad kind of sat him down and had a little talk to him after they got back home on Sunday and said, "You're going to make a joke of this and get the crowd back on your side." And basically that's what they did. He showed up at the racetrack and they took the blade out of the back of the pickup, bolted it to the front of the car, and brought it out for hot laps with that bulldozer blade on it. But he never raced with that on it, but it was a stroke of genius.
Bobby Sherwood says it pretty well here. You beat Arnie, you beat the best.
Absolutely.
So Arnie Flint, a member of the Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame, and then our next driver that will be inducted here, who we're going to announce tonight, I think for a lot of folks, my father included, all you have to say is the car number, and people are on board. So
his first wife owned a beauty shop. It's shampoo. VO5, Wes Rogers. Wes came down from Geneva. He had some connections down in the Woodhull area. And he came down from Geneva. He opened the 1965 season with a 56 Chevy, 6-cylinder, and won a couple races. Pure white VO5. And next stepped up to a pure white Camaro VO5 and won some more races. And then he got started to be a little innovative. And he built a couple more Camaros over the next couple of years. Wes was an innovator. he would win 1 week by half a lap, and then he'd take the car home and he'd tinker with it to see if he could get a little more.
Okay.
And he'd bring it back and he'd lose by a straightaway. And then he'd take it home and tinker with it some more. Then he'd come back and he'd win by half a lap. He was never concerned about championships. He was 100% concerned with winning the race he was in.
Okay.
That was all. That was his focus. The other part about Wes, he was the first bought chassis at Woodhull Raceway. He convinced Jim Williams to let him put a show car engineering frame under a Vega late model. They had fenders in those days. And they were the transition from late model to modified, but he convinced Jim, he said, this is the wave of the future, and he convinced Jim to let him put a Howard Cockey show car chassis under it.
Wow.
And he did well with it. He didn't dominate, and that was the key. Jim said, you didn't dominate, so you're not obsolete in every car out here. We'll open it up so you can use them. Of course, the late models became modified, the fenders disappeared, so on and so forth, and it just went on from there.
Yeah.
The other thing about Wes Rogers is he's built a lot of motors that raced at Woodhull Raceway and a lot of championship motors that raced at Woodhull Raceway. And every Saturday night, he and his wife come through the gate and sat in the same spot in the grandstand to watch the races.
So we move from the VO5, now Hall of Famer, Wes Rogers, and now we move on to a driver who is very, very well known here in the Southern Tier, Chuck Kennison, now a Hall of Famer.
Absolutely. You've got the Blue 9X in the picture, I'm sure, up out there. Chuck started out racing number 9. And the first season or two at Chimong Speed Realm, he was number 9. Well, then he started branching out and racing at other tracks. And he came to Woodhull in 65. And he'd either have to put a 1, make it 91, or make it 19, or make it 9X, or 9K, or whatever, because there was already a 9 there. So about I don't know, it must have been about the 66 or 67, when they lettered the car, they made it 9X. And he says, there, we don't have to worry about it next time. But Chuck raced at Woodhull. He's raced all over the Northeast.
Yeah.
But to a certain extent, Chuck ended up with Woodhull as a home track. Even though he traveled a little bit, he'd run Dundee a lot. He'd run Woodhull, but once in a while he'd take off and run someplace else on a Saturday night. But he always come back to Woodhull. And Woodhull loved him. There's more Chuck Kennison stories than we could sit here till 9 o'clock talking about just Chuck Kennison stories. But he won a feature. He raced in 5 different decades: the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s.
Ah.
Every single decade, he won at least one feature.
Okay.
And the final one wasn't at Woodhull. I believe it was over the hill or Red Line. One of the two of them. I'm not 100% sure. But I'd have to go back and look on that. But off the top of my head, but a lot of them were at Woodhull. And very well-liked driver. Very just, what do you need? Even, like I say, legendary stories, including the wrestling match between him and Don Lawson in the pits one night.
Oh, wow.
If you have never seen two somewhat heavy-set, mid-50s guys that weren't in the greatest shape in the world having a physical altercation of a race after a race, you've missed the entire point of being at a racetrack. Because they both broke up laughing at the end of it.
Nice. I like that. I like that. So a lot of people here talking about Chuck Kennison, and one of the great stories here is the folks that are talking about, when you're a young race fan, and we have such a focus on young race fans at Woodhull. When you learn to count, sometimes you learn to count by driver number. Who's this number? Who's that number? The 9X, Chuck Kennison. That's a mainstay with that. So we move on from Chuck Kennison, and for the rest of, we've got 3 more names to release here for our initial class of the Hall of Fame. Our next driver, we go from driver 9X to driver 61. And the photos that I'm going to put up here for this Hall of Famer, Morgan, you mentioned this, I think, about a driver a couple of weeks ago that was racing with us, but this driver, car number 61, this heat race picture, his hair looks perfect. Did he have a comb in his suit?
I think Ronnie Baker was the only one that carried a comb in his fire suit. He also polished his engineer boots when he got out of the car. But Don Caio is a legend at Woodhull. He's got championships, he's got wins, and he never quit. He raced at Woodhull back in the early 60s. He raced all over the place back in the 60s with 55 Fords and 57 Chevys and so on. He's raced Fords and Chevys and a little bit of everything. I've got a picture of him racing a B modified at Mills, an open wheel car back in 64, I believe it was.
Okay.
So he did a lot, but one thing that stands out about Don, his last season, he finished, I think, 4th in points. The year before, he was the track champion. This was after 5 years straight of saying, I'm going to retire. And then, well, the boys put together this car and asked me to come down and drive it. And he'd show back up. And here's this gray-haired old logger that looks like he ought to be a crew chief, that straps into one of these modifieds, goes out there, and he's still on the wheel like he's 16 years old. I mean, he just never lost that talent. And the thing that stands out about Don Caio to me, as I grew up watching him, is the same thing that stands out to me about Chuck Kennison. Chuck Kennison in a 53 Ford, Don Caio in a 57 Chevy, whatever. All the way up into the torsion bar technical modifieds, they adapted and they kept winning. That's talent.
Les Smith commenting here, greatest mod driver from the 70s and 80s. So Don Caio, now a Woodhull Raceway Hall of Famer. We've got 2 names left for you to go into the first class of the Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame here in 2018. The first driver, so much history at Woodhull Raceway, and for me, kind of coming into this kind of on the back end of his career, I know him for the truck. I mean, that's how I remember Ken Peoples Sr.'s racing career is the truck, but there's a whole lot more to that story, but he's now a Woodhull Raceway Hall of Famer.
In the late 60s, he showed up at Woodhull Raceway as a Tuscarora farm kid, and they'd thrown together a 1964 Ford Galaxy, which is probably what they could afford to find, or something was given to them. And it was bright green with a black top, number 289. I'm not sure if that's what was under the hood or not, but I don't know if he ever won a race with that car, but he learned a lot.
Okay.
And he fell in love with racing. And over the years, he was the last 6-cylinder to run in the 320 modified class. In fact, we dropped the 6-cylinder modifieds, 6-cylinder sportsman, and moved on, combined and made it the 320 modified class. There were 3 guys that had 6 cylinders to start the season. That was Kenny Peoples, Dan Deming, and Dan Deming's was a blue oval,
Okay.
and Dick Hess. The first 320 V8 modified class, and we had played this up that we were going 320 modified, and it was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. The first feature was won by Kenny Peoples' six-cylinder. So,
Nice.
oops. But everybody kind of
And not the first race of a long-standing tradition that Ken would be known for at Woodhull Raceway. We just talked about him a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. He moved up to the 320s and didn't. I don't know, actually, to tell you the truth, and I'm going to have to talk to Kenny because I've searched my memory books. I don't think he ever ran a V8 modified back then. I think at the end of that season is when he moved over to street stock.
Okay.
He just did not adapt over to the modifieds. He went over to street stock. And street stock, super stock, always class cars, multiple championships, just absolutely at the top of the field. He drove for Charlie Thomas for a while. He was one half of the first ever tie for a feature win at Woodhull Raceway.
Okay.
And that was him and Lauren Kayward. And I'm going to have to look. The memory's not working just exactly where it's at, but while I'm on that subject, it was either later that year or the following year, same white Nova, that he was in the second ever tie, and that was with the 21 car of Johnson. And Kenny was the constant. He was the one that was there and tied for the win. Up through the truck, promoting Woodhull Raceway by taking the cars to car shows. You picked up the phone, called him, he'd go.
Yeah.
And it was always class act, always a class act. Well, then Kenny Jr. came along, and he started racing in the bandit class at Black Rock and then working up.
Yeah.
And it's just been a family deal.
Yeah.
It's grown and grown and grown and grown. And he's still, every night at the races, helping Kenny Jr. out. And class act.
So you've got all sorts of comments, and I knew there would be for this inductee as well. Jerry Symonds says they used to have T-shirts that said 6 equals 8, talking about that 6-cylinder. And you know, a lot of people with talking about the truck. Bobby Sherwood actually says the first 2 features were won by Kenny Sr.
I'm not going to argue with Bob. He's probably got the program in front of him. I did that one off the top of my head, but
So Ken Peoples Sr., now Woodhull Raceway Hall of Famer. And Morgan, that brings us to the last inductee for the very first class of the Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame. And tell us about it.
back a lot of years ago, young man graduated from high school, decided he wanted to be a stock car driver. His dad was a fairly successful stock car driver, but it ended his driving career. And his dad said, okay, we'll build one. That driver was Kurt Van Pelt. Ran long a few years. Kurt had a championship and a whole lot of feature wins, and brother Billy decided he wanted to be a race car driver. And he took Kurt's old car. They were in modified at that point. He took Kurt's old car, and Kurt had the new car. And they ran a good portion of that year with 2 cars in the team. Well, Jim Van Pelt was not really a high-dollar racer. Couldn't afford to run 2 cars, so Kurt ended up taking a back seat to Billy starting his career, because Kurt had run a few years. But the constant, as Billy started picking up checkered flags, the constant goes right back to the Van Pelt garage and that guy with the glasses setting up the cars and building the cars. I said that he wasn't a high dollar racer. He had good equipment, don't get me wrong. He spent his money wisely. But he was a machinist. He could weld, he could fabricate, he could buy a brand new Troyer chassis, and when something broke or bent on it, he'd fabricate the replacement part rather than go buy it. That was how he kept racing, and he supported Billy's racing habit for a good many number of years through a number of championships and a lot of feature wins. And he's gotten back into it. As a crew chief and a car owner, if he had picked up a championship trophy for every one that one of his drivers or a car that he had something to do with, if he had got the championship trophy instead of them, he'd probably have more championship trophies than anybody else at Woodhull Raceway because he built 90% of those cars back there 100% and hauled them all over the country and kept them on the racetrack. And, you know, he wasn't a driver at Woodhull, but if it wasn't for Jim Van Pelt and the legacy that he had and the drive and determination that he had, the legacy of his two boys and everybody chasing them, they're the target.
Yeah.
They're the top of the field.
Yep.
While they're racing, there's a go getting around that. That wouldn't happen either. The other thing I will tell you about Jim Van Pelt, very opinionated, staunchly supporting his team, sometimes very verbally, nose to nose with the man a couple times, with both of us having red face, but I'm going to tell you what. When I picked up the phone and said, Jim, I need a car for a car show next Monday, the answer was always, what time you want it there? And that's one thing about Jim. So, deserving nominee.
Absolutely. So let's recap all of our. I know there's some folks that have popped in and out. We've got some folks that are even joining us from as far away as Florida that are tuning in tonight. So let's recap all of our inductees for the first class of the Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame. George Williams, Jim and Alice Williams, Bob Williams, Earl and Dali Eccleston, Ronnie Towsley, Harold and Shirley Sherwood, Bob Paul, Herbie Layfield, Ron Baker, Arnie Flint, Wes Rogers, Chuck Kennison, Don Caio, Ken Peoples Sr., Jim Van Pelt. When you hear that list, and I know you've known about the list for a while, but when you hear those names just now, Morgan, what's the first thought that comes to mind?
I'm going to credit it right back to you. You made the statement earlier. There's no active people there. They are all history. And that's what this first 15 really needed to be.
Yeah.
Was a base of history. We're going to be doing this every year. There's going to be 5 inductees going in every year. There's 200 out there that deserve to be in there. But this is the base of history. The people that got us to where we are right now.
Everybody commenting here, and I don't think there's anybody here that disagrees with the class of 2018. A lot of people saying well done to the Hall of Fame committee. And Morgan, I think that's something that we should highlight as we kind of wrap up with the Hall of Fame portion here tonight. The committee that you helped put together did a phenomenal job, and it was not an easy task that they were tasked with.
I had one of them on the third round of voting that got a hold of me and says, I didn't realize this was going to be so hard. It's 30 names, and to pare it down to 15, because every one of those 30-some names had a reason to be nominated. They had a reason. And what I told the guys was, when we got all done, I said, I want everybody happy, and they all signed off as being happy on the final list. And I told them, You had your pet picks. I know you did, because I did.
Yeah.
A couple of them didn't get in, and a couple of them did get in. But don't give up on your pet picks, because they deserve it too, and we've got more to do next year. So the ones that didn't make the cut, easily half of those people, if not all of them, will be on the nomination list next year.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I think it's important to mention kind of what we're looking at for the upcoming years for the Hall of Fame, because we started with 15 this year. The plan is to do 5 inductees from here on out, and to me, though the job was hard this year, can you just imagine next year when we get 30 nominees and we got to pare it down to 5?
I'll give you a little situation. We went through the first round of voting. We had 32 nominees, and I said, give me 15. We got 2 unanimous picks. They got set off to the side. They're in.
Right.
The second round of voting, we're down to 30. And I said, give me 12. We got 3 unanimous picks.
So they go.
It was a process. It's hard, and everybody had their own direction they were going. So I mean, it was hard to get down to that final list, but I'm happy with that final list. I really think that we've got a good cross section, and it is a cross section. Officials, crew members, drivers, car owners, even a fan from the stand can qualify to go into the Hall of Fame. There's a couple I can think of right now that could be nominated to go into the Hall of Fame. Maybe not real soon, but soon.
Yeah.
Sometime.
So I'll go through a couple of folks asking about running through the list one more time, so we'll do that. George Williams, Jim and Alice Williams, Bob Williams, Earl and Dali Eccleston, Ronnie Towsley, Harold and Shirley Sherwood, Bob Paul, Herbie Layfield, Ron Baker, Arnie Flint, Wes Rogers, Chuck Kennison, Don Caio, Ken Peoples Sr., and Jim Van Pelt, your 2018 inductees for the very first class for the Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame. Morgan, I think the other thing to mention, too, is the Hall of Fame committee really no influence at all from track ownership, from track management, and that was by design.
We are completely separate from track. At this point, Teddy found out who the nominees, who the inductees are, if he's listening to this show.
Right.
I have an email to send him,
Yep.
but he didn't know coming into tonight's show even who was coming up on there.
Yep.
On Saturday night, I told him a couple.
Yeah.
We had a little talk about how we were going to do this and everything else, but he didn't have the full list, and he didn't write them down when I talked to him. So he has had no influence on the thing. It's been totally a separate deal, and I would like to keep it that way. I don't think management would influence it in a bad way, but I don't want anybody else to get the idea that influence is there. The other thing that I'm going to mention, Steve, and we haven't mentioned, next year it's going to be a whole new ball of wax, because we're looking for fan input next year. When we start the season next year,
Yes.
We'll be looking for fan input on nominees for the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
We're still going to keep control of it with the committee. They're going to be the ones taking all the information and so on. We'll have to figure out how we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe some sort of weighted point system, so that if somebody gets 10 votes to be in the Hall of Fame from the fans, and somebody gets 100, that guy with the 100's weighted a little bit differently.
Yeah.
However we do it, we've got to sit down and do some figuring on how we do it. But we do want that fan support and that fan involvement into the Hall of Fame for next year.
Next year there will be some kind of fan vote component. I'm looking forward to that. We did not do that this year just because we wanted to get this base. We wanted to get started, get a good, solid group of 15 inducted into the Hall of Fame to kind of get things started. So we're looking forward to that next year. Morgan, I can't tell you thank you enough for organizing this and making what you and I kind of thought of as a pipe dream over the winter really and into the spring really come to life. So
I'm just a worker bee. You came up with, you pushed the timing of the idea, and the committee took the bull by the horns and did what they needed to do. I can't tell those guys enough how happy I am with the job they did and really stepping up to the plate. Had to chase a couple of them for votes once in a while, but everybody's got a busy lifestyle.
Sure.
But they stepped up to the plate.
But we got it done.
They did a great job.
Absolutely. All right, well, that's going to kind of wrap things up here for the Woodhull Raceway Hall of Fame induction announcement here. We are going to go through the results. Now, later in the week, I will put up another video here to go over the Victory Lane interviews from Saturday night's racing action. But we will go over the top 10s for you here from Saturday night, and just a quick comment about them. We knew tonight would be a little bit of a longer show because of the Hall of Fame announcement for the class of 2018. But Kim, Megan, if you guys are ready to go, we're going to roll right into our results from Saturday night. It was Patrick Hoop's trucking night. The CRSA 305 sprints were on hand with us, and we'll talk about the winner, Jeff Trombley. And, of course, all of their results and point standings, press releases, and such can be found at crsa.myracepass.com. But Jeff Trombley picked up the win for them, and I know a lot of people picked him on their fantasy racing team. So 25 points to those teams this week. So a great job there, taking some of the advice that their media director, Toby LaGrange, sent over to us for our fantasy league here this week. But, Kim, let's start off with the modifieds. What a thriller on Saturday night. Dylan Groover picks up the win.
All right, Megan, go with the results.
Brady Fultz came in second. Third was Dayton Brewer. Donnie Lawson was fourth. Corey Costa was fifth. And then Joe Ginn, Brian Knowles, Art Goodyear, Bob Silvernail, and Kevin Chilson.
Brian Doolittle. Yeah, Brian Doolittle. Yep.
I was looking at this, and I was like, this is not right. This is not right.
Knowles didn't hop into a modified. Actually, he gave his car up for his brother
confused.
earlier or later in the night. But, yeah. And Dylan Groover, I mean, what a thrilling race. If that's not the race of 2018, boy, we're going to see some thrillers at the end of the year to try and beat that one. Last lap pass for the win. Got nerf bar down the back straightaway, and then just slung it up on the outside. And all Brady Fultz could do was sit there and watch him drive by, because at that point, that was a sell the farm move in turns 3 and 4.
Took the Lyle Sherwood line.
Oh, he did. And he made it work. How about our Napa Crate Sportsmen, their 25-lap feature on Saturday night?
Kim?
Sorry, audio issues. Okay. Stacy Jackson won. Stevie Hartman got second. AJ Petrobowski Jr. got third. Brett Buno got fourth. And Bobby Peoples rounds out the top 5. Jake Ginn got 6th. Dave Richmond 7th. Brandon Butler 8th. Kenny Peoples Jr. 9th. And Bob Butcher rounds out the top 10.
Couple of notes I wanted to mention from this race. Stacy Jackson gets by with just a couple of laps to go. But I wanted to highlight A.J. Petrobowski Jr. led almost 20 laps of that race on Saturday night. Ran himself a great race, and really, the bottom just went away at the end, and Stacy found something up top, kind of like Dylan Groover did in the modifieds. And what was odd about that was they were on, the modified was first feature of the night, Crate Sportsman was second to last feature of the night, but yet it was the same storyline at the end, Jackson making that move on the outside. So Second win of the season there for Stacy. Let's move on to the SWL Awards Crate Late Models. They had $1,000 to win up for grabs. They had 12 cars on hand, and picking up the win, 2 for 2 now in his 2 appearances at Woodhull, John Waters.
Second was Jason McGregor. Third was Darren Horton. Fourth was Jason Knowles. Fifth was Kurt Stebbins. And then Scott Gerdick, Brad Messler, Steve LeBaron, Joe Layfield, and Whitney Horton rounded out the top 10.
So that was your crate late model. And Morgan, a tough bit of luck there for Jason Knowles, who had some problems in the drive line. Had to hop into his brother's car, the 7 car, and the first laps that car's had on a racetrack competitively was the heat race.
And if I remember right, that is one of Jason's cars.
Well, no, that's
or is that the new one?
That's the new one.
That
is
the new one. All right.
So,
I know. Brian had borrowed one.
Yes.
For a little
Yep.
while.
He called it his rent-a-ride. He told me that rent-a-ride. He was cleaning leaves and a couple snakes out of the chassis, and I said, you know what? That would have been enough for me. I'd have burned it right to the ground. Snakes in there? Come on now. But. So again, John Waters picking up the win and, had himself a nice lead. But I do want to mention what a great run for Jason McGregor to finish second. And not only that, Darren Horton finished third. And for Horton's run, it was kind of odd for us because Darren was making ground on the top side, and we're used to seeing that car on the bottom and making a lot of ground on the bottom. So, that was a good run for him.
He's been solid most of the season.
Yeah.
Mid top 5, but he's shown some real promise. They've been chasing the car a little bit.
Yeah.
They're getting the setup, and he must have just found someplace where it liked to run, and he took it up there. The other part about it was the track was a little slick Saturday night.
Little bit.
Guys that I talked to said there wasn't a lot of bite down low, but there was some up top. And if you had the right gearing and if you had the guts to go up there you could get a pull off the corners off the top.
Yep, and I love hearing stories of the little ones that are listening to the program as we're talking about them. Little Carson Cece says, my Uncle Jay broke his car. He couldn't run his car. Yeah, it's I love hearing that. I love hearing those stories. I think Danielle Thomas was the one last week that had her 6-year-old listening to the show and jabbering right away about the races from the previous week. Let's move into the street stocks. Their top 10, and this was, between this and the modified finish, my 2 favorite races of the night. Dan Gardner, and it was interesting to find out in Victory Lane, first career win. Never won a race at Woodhull. Never won a feature race at Woodhull. But he did on Saturday, and he took Uncle Butch's number 62 to Victory Lane. A lot of people may not realize if they're newer fans or have been coming to the raceway as long as I have as an employee now, just a couple of years. He actually has started his racing career driving car number 15. And then when he came back in 2016, decided to take Uncle Butch's number as 62. I remember them telling me that story. And when I asked him about that, the emotion just came out. And you got to realize just how big a win that was for Dan, but for the whole family. And that was awesome. How about the rest of the top 10 from the Joe Wilcox Performance Automatic Street Stocks?
Kurt Stebbins got second. Then it was Brett Marlatt, Tracy Dunn, Dylan Cece rounds out the top 5. Mike Williams, Ryan Krause, Mick Seeley, and let's see here, Willie Rice and Jared Dennis rounds out the top 10.
Tip of the cap to Kurt Stebbins. He was really digging hard on the outside, and I thought for a moment that Kurt Stebbins could have been the third different driver in the same night to work the outside lane and pull off a win. Came up just a car length short there at the end. But great job there for Dan Gardner, career win number 1 at Woodhull, and great job for him in that Potter chassis. So Gardner gets the win there. Let's move on to the Doherty Auto Sales and Service mini stocks, where they have not been able to find the kryptonite for Chris Woodard. 4 races in a row for car number 32.
Ray Heyer came in second, Travis Webster third, Scott Lehman fourth, and Carl Bourne got fifth. Jason Ketro, Josh Webster, Rick Amadon, Derek Puryear, and Kane Stebbins rounded out the top 10.
Want to give a shout out to Travis Webster, who was our Napa Auto Parts Driver of the Week a couple weeks ago. Another third place finish for that F7 machine, and for a guy who his racing efforts have been mostly RC cars in the last couple of years, he has taken to this mini stock quite well, and I'm very happy for him, to see a new driver come in and have some success here. But, boy, let's not take anything away from that 32 car, Morgan. They have found something on that ride.
Quickers have always have strong rides, and their driver has been in victory lane a number of times before. So it hasn't been too bad a deal for them. But I've been watching some other cars in there, and everybody's stepping up a little bit. Stepping up a little bit, and it's getting harder and harder for them to get out there at the front. And the first couple races, Adam Austin was right there.
Yeah.
He struggled a little bit. Now he's coming back a little bit. There's a bunch more they're right there. They're just that far off of ending that streak for the 32.
And I know this won't be the first time I've said it this season, and I guarantee it won't be the last time I say it, but Kim brings up a great point. The mini stock car count has been phenomenal this year. And again, when you can expect anywhere from 14 to 18 cars on a weekly basis, this is a far cry from a division last year and the front wheel drives where we were considering, is it time to combine these guys? And the mini stock guys have come back in 2018 with a resounding no. So a great job, and we thank all the mini stock guys and front wheel guys that have been turning out, because they're putting together some great fields. Talking about the front wheel drives, the Bears Auto Body front wheel drives, Cody Baker snapped the winning streak for Adam Del Grosso. He says, no three-peat for you. Cody Baker gets the win in the 14 car.
Adam Del Grosso gets second, Scott Lehman Jr. third, Matt Prescott, Ryan Austin, Nick Brown, Nate Freeland, and Brennan Swigart and Joe Gillespie round out the top 9, I should say.
So we have, there's all of our results. The Hobby Stocks and the Warriors were off this past week. But coming up this Saturday night, June 16th, we have got another great show planned. It is the Troops Creek Auto Parts Crate Late Model King of the Ring, a single elimination match race where the drivers line up on the infield. They get to go down and see Kim. They get to draw a poker chip to determine whether they start on the inside or the outside row for their match race. And winner moves on, loser heads it back to the trailer. So we've got that. Also, our second Power Wheels race of the season. And this has really turned into a very, very successful event for us over the last couple of seasons. And I've been thrilled with the turnout that it's remained steady. Last year, it was the hot ticket item, and we pulled a lot of Power Wheels cars last year. Glad to see that that's continuing to happen. Announcement that we haven't made publicly, but hey, it's inside the Bullring. That's what we do here. We are scheduling, and I'm not sure when the last time this happened was. It's not since I've been here, and I'm excited to do this. We're going to have an autograph night at Woodhull Raceway. It's coming up, actually, when we get off the program tonight. I need to call Ted White so we can put that on the schedule. we need to pick a date that works. The idea will be we will run hot laps. We will run the heat races. After the last heat race is over, the drivers will bring their cars down to the front stretch. They will park them. We'll park them however many wide, 3 or 4 wide, or 2 wide if we have to. Probably more like 3 or 4 wide to get all those cars down there. But then we'll open it up. Everybody can come down. They can get autographs, take pictures. Race teams are encouraged. I've seen a lot of racetracks that do this. It almost turns into a trick-or-treating type of thing for the kids. But what it does is it allows our young fans, we talked about this earlier, to make positive memories at the racetrack. And I cannot wait for this to happen. A couple of things that we're working on for that autograph night is we're going to put a book together that is kind of like a driver directory, almost a driver roster, if you will, with the driver's name and a photo of their car. And the kid, these will be available for purchase at the photo booth. You'll be able to take that, and the kids can take that to their favorite drivers and get autographs and kind of collect it in one place. So that's something that we're working on for our autograph night. That will be announced. The date will be announced coming up. But for those that are tuning in tonight, you're the first to hear it publicly. So we're going to have ourselves a great autograph night. I cannot wait to do that. Ladies, do you have anything else that we need to touch on before we get out of here tonight?
I don't think so.
All right.
Me neither.
So Megan, probably for you coming up later this week, you've got a driver profile. Who are we going to hear from this week?
We are going to hear from Dylan Cece.
All right, street stock point leader in the Joe Wilcox Performance Automatic Street Stock. So watch out for that a little bit later this week. And as always, drivers, for Kim, draw closes at 5:45 sharp. Don't be a minute late.
I'm very serious about that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I think that's all we got for you tonight, folks. For those that have, and there's a lot of folks that are still here on the broadcast tonight, thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the coverage that we're bringing to you here with Inside the Bullring, because I can tell you for sure we're having a ball doing it. I've got no less than half a dozen emails over the last month of people that have just wanted to write in and say they enjoy what we're doing. We thank you for that, because, us three talking heads and Morgan joining us tonight, we could come on here and talk every week, and it's nice to hear that people are enjoying and are interested in what we're doing here, and we appreciate your support of Woodhull Raceway. So on behalf of Ted and Brandy White and the entire staff at Woodhull Raceway and all of us here at Inside the Bullring, and of course, before I get out of here, we should talk about our fantasy picks for this week. Megan, would you like to go first here to tell us who you're rolling with this week?
Sure. So in the Bullring Brigade, I'm sticking with Adam Del Grosso. For the second group, the Woodhull Wingnuts, I am choosing Dayton Brewer, which is a switch because originally I had Ron Cartwright Jr. last week. So in the High Bank Hustlers, I'm still sticking with Matt Prescott.
All right. Kim, how about for you? Team The Wheel Deal.
I am the wheel deal, I actually don't even know because my fantasy thing is not loading. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, now it is. Okay, so I'm sticking with Adam because, Megan's just got to be like me. And then...
Whoa. I had Adam first. Get out of here.
Anyway, I have Tracy Dunn in the Woodhull Wingnuts. And then my third group I'm going to change, but it's honestly to be determined because I still have no idea. I had Rick Amadon, and he did good last week. He did. But I just need a higher finish, which he could produce this week too. But I need to figure it out.
Well, for me, last week I tried to play the old handicap game, and I went with Billy Van Pelt. Unfortunately, the motor expired on lap 11, so that didn't quite pan out for me. I had Kurt Stebbins in the street stocks, which was great. I stuck with him. I changed up my driver last week, and I went with Jeff Trombley as a write-in candidate, and he picked up a win for me, so I made up some points there. For this week, obviously, I got to change out Jeff Trombley as the sprint cars won't be there this week, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I've been talking real positive about this guy for the last 2 or 3 weeks now, and I feel like I've got a great opportunity here to put him on my fantasy lineup. I'm going to roll with Travis Webster in the mini stocks in the High Bank Hustler division, as I've got to get that sprint car driver out of there as they won't be there this week. So I'm going to roll with Billy Van Pelt, Kurt Stebbins in the street stock, and Travis Webster in the mini stocks. So there we go. Morgan, is there any drivers that stand out to you that folks listening tonight, if they're trying to pick their fantasy drivers, who should they keep their eye on?
There are a number of ones, and really, rather than pick any specific one, Mike Williams is a good one. He's had a couple top threes, top fives.
Yes.
It depends on what your totals are.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be that guy that sneaks in there. You were talking about Cody Baker taking down Adam Del Grosso. And
one of our Hall of Fame committee members just popped in the house.
you were talking about Cody Baker taking down Adam Del Grosso.
Yeah.
The one that stood out to me was the heat race, and I'll leave you with this quote, where you can't count out anybody.
Yeah.
I watched the heat race with Cody Baker and Brown in the other 14 car.
Yes.
That car sat at Bears Salvage Yard, ready to go to the crusher. They brought it back out so this kid could get started in racing. Cody Baker took the lead. The kid run him down in the old Subaru and passed him and picked up the win. And I said it to you. It's not my quote, but I'm going to repeat it here. That's like selling your gun and getting shot by
getting
it.
shot by it. That's right. Oh, that's not a bad pick. And after this week, he's got a new nickname, Novocaine Nick Brown. I wrote about him this week. I said he's like a good dose of Novocaine at the dentist. He's going to lock you top 5 after top 5 in that old Subaru. So there you go. Great job. And Travis Webster says, please don't pick me on your fantasy team. That's too much pressure. But I'll tell you, hey, man, I think it's 3 straight top 5s now, and a couple of those now being third-place finishes. So that's what I'm going to roll with. But, folks, that's all we've got for you tonight. Thanks for tuning in on this episode. Hour and 27 minutes. Not too bad. Not too bad, Morgan. So thanks for tuning in. Congratulations to all the Hall of Fame inductees for 2018. We're very, very excited about that. And though the work for the selection is done, now the work begins for August 25th.
Now it's the chicken barbecue for the afternoon and getting the sponsorship taken care of, which I've got the plaques taken care of, but the sponsorship for the plaques and for the program book and doing the logistics of getting hold of all the families and everything else. And now the real work begins.
Now the real work begins. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Remember, you can listen and watch Inside the Bullring every Monday night at 6 p.m. right here on the Woodhull Raceway Facebook page for Kim Symonds. I'm not going to mix their names up this week. Megan Dupuy. I'm Steve Ovens saying thank you for tuning in. We will see you Saturday night at New York's toughest bullring.
An hour and 27 minutes. You're the DJ.
I know.
You're supposed to be watching the time.